Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. So this video is about their Royal Highnesses, Prince Harry and Princess Meghan, and their recent comments about the Commonwealth. So these two, well, they wanted privacy, which is why they're speaking out in the media yet again. There's a certain illogicality there, which is lost only on them. So the thing is, he's still president of the Queen's Commonwealth Trust, and she's vice president of it. But if you really wanted to be rid of public duties, you'd stand down from those posts. For some reason, they still got them. So as they're heading the QCT, should they speak to the media? Possibly. But I think these people, this couple, are notorious for wanting to have their cake and eat it. We want privacy, but we want to be public figures speaking on public affairs. Now, they should be uncontroversial. Royalty is always supposed to be uncontroversial. I can't remember which Labour MP said royalty should be seen and not heard. We used to say about children, because the more you see them, the more you could come to dislike them, or just see that they're disappointingly ordinary, all too human. Was it Badgett who said they shouldn't let too much daylight in on the magic, and just don't voice their opinions? You might completely agree with them, you might completely disagree with them, but it'll put off at least some people, or a viewpoint which is popular now, but in decades to come might be deeply unfashionable. So they ought to try and be above politics. I know even these two are not quite crass enough to endorse one politician or other. So they're telling us how the Commonwealth ought to change. I think it's a bit hubristic that they arrogate to themselves this right to say how it must change. We're supposed to have the dignified crown, not the personal crown. Have they heard of the English Civil War? Anyway, the Commonwealth is voluntary, completely voluntary. So if any member state of the Commonwealth doesn't wish to be in it, they can leave like that. There's no process. Just announce we've gone. All right? They don't need permission. They don't need a referendum. And some of them have gone, and a few of them have come back. So the Commonwealth of Nations, in case you don't know, is an association mainly for former British Empire countries, so the UK, erstwhile colonies, and some other countries which were never British colonies have requested to join. Well, we know its history. I'm not sure that Prince Harry or Princess Meghan do. So the British Empire turned into the Commonwealth gradually from about the 1920s. The Dominions, first of all, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and then eventually after the Second World War, more and more and more, because there are no colonies left. So that's for the governments to decide. There's the Commonwealth heads of government meeting every 2 years to determine these matters, and it's not for these two to say how it ought to change, or that if it needs to change at all. These two can never resist a fashionable course for long, and their interlocutors were nodding sagely on this Zoom chat kind of thing they were doing. So they said they need to acknowledge the past. Acknowledged what? That the Commonwealth was fantastic, the British Empire was fantastic, or was satanic, or what? I mean, if it was so infernal, why does the Commonwealth even exist as a legacy of it? How? What in particular was so bad? Slavery? Yeah, monstrous, which the British Empire did more to end than any other force in history. And I know the British Empire was the worst offender in terms of being prolific in kidnapping people and keeping them in chains and shipping them across the Atlantic Ocean in particular, and treating them with diabolical cruelty. All that's absolutely true. That's not news to anyone. And there was wrongdoing by British soldiers or their allies, atrocities on occasion, things like that. But I'm not sure when this wasn't acknowledged, or this doesn't come as a surprise to anyone who's ever opened any history book. And so an apology needs to be made, or what? They didn't go into specifics, possibly wisely. And why does it need to change, and why now? If it was so unacceptable, then these countries wouldn't have joined the Commonwealth anyway. So there's no even primus inter pares in the Commonwealth. They're all completely at parity, and the Commonwealth governments can determine what's going to happen. The Commonwealth is not the Empire, but you wouldn't expect Prince Harry to know that. He's short on grey matter, academically subnormal, got 2 A-levels. A-levels are school-leaving examinations in most of the United Kingdom. He did art and one other, and he got an E grade and an art. I don't even remember. His art teacher cheated for him. Don't believe me, but she secretly recorded her conversation with him about her doing the coursework for him, and this all came out in a court case when she sued Eton about unfair dismissal. But for some reason his grade wasn't rescinded. It seems to be grossly unfair that he got away with this flagrant cheating. So I suspect he's just a parrot for his wife, because Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex, whatever her shortcomings, she's not dim. Maybe quite manipulative and clever, having him wrapped around her little finger. So if privilege is so offensive to these two, why don't they give up theirs? Give up your title then, your prominence, your money. Why on earth would anyone listen to Prince Harry if it wasn't a prince? Who is he? He's, just an ex-army officer who's never done any job in his life. He's a guy who used to wear a swastika armband. He's a guy who used to use the word packy. He's a guy who used to assault journalists for just doing their job, just taking a photo of him. No, he's a loudmouth. He used to smoke cannabis. He was a heavy drinker. He was a boorish brute. Now, okay, he's cleaned up his act. He's in his 30s now. He's more placid. But the only reason that he's got any of the limelight is simply because he happened to be born a prince. That is privilege. That is official privilege. There's nothing more inegalitarian than a royal family. They could renounce their title and all the money as well. They're not getting taxpayers' money, are they, anymore? I don't know. Well, they could renounce all the inheritance from his mother, much of which was a divorce settlement from the royal family, because when he was 18, he inherited several £1 million. But anyway, the Commonwealth does a lot of good to help needy people. It has its own aid agency. It's the Commonwealth of Learning, like an educational trust and things like that. So trying to promote development, and these are some of the least developed countries in the world that are being assisted in this way. So these two should not be advocates for a particular cause. How about the people who believe the opposite, that the Commonwealth shouldn't change, is absolutely perfect, or that think that we really need to compose pyans to the British Empire? These people have a viewpoint, and these two are to represent everyone, including that lot. They're entitled to form a view, the prince and princess. I don't dispute that. And yes, they have the legal right to vocalise it, but should they? It'd be better if they do not. Reticence on their part will be warmly appreciated. So this will be a very meet and apposite of them to just put a sock in it. Okay, keep stum for a while and stop wading into contentious issues. They talked about the uncomfortable past, and I mentioned it, but they were perhaps wise not to be too explicit about what they were alluding to. Anyway, the Commonwealth countries need to have a reckoning with this lugubrious, wicked past. Okay, so there are some hideous chapters. But now various West African countries, they've apologised to their diaspora for the appalling crime of enslavement. But Prince Harry, where's your apology? I mean, the royal family, they're involved in the Royal African Company. The commodity that the Royal African Company traded in was Homo sapiens. Right? Their cargo was our own species. And so he has inherited some of that wealth. So give it up then, particularly to those who are the victims of your ancestors and ancestresses. These are ill-gotten gains. Disgorge your filthy lucre, your blood-stained lucre. If you're so uncomfortable with titles and wealth, why don't you give yours up and then shut up? Because there's no other reason anyone would know who you are or care who you are if you hadn't been born a prince. So, and this is what he was saying, equality does not, Meghan was saying, this is a direct quotation from her, equality does not put anyone on the back foot, it puts us all on the same footing, and is a fundamental human right. Yeah, remember that bit, equality. You're a princess. That it flies in the face of equality. The notion of royalty does violence to egalitarianism. It's completely inegalitarian. It's not an equal opportunities position. People aren't chosen on the basis of merit or even desire to do the job, efforts, qualifications. So I mean, the hypocrisy is just quite staggering. These people have no self-awareness. There's arrant irrationality on their part. So Her Royal Highness, she's in favour of Black Lives Matter. So am I. And I went on a BLM protest outside the US Embassy a few weeks ago. But anyway, they say they live in the United States. The Black Lives Matter movement is controversial. I think the majority of Americans agree with it, but it's not a huge majority. It's not like 95% or something. And then agree with what aspects of it. I mean, should black people be protected from murder? Yes, of course. If the police murder a black person, should this police officer face justice? Yes, he or she certainly should. I agree with that bit, but I don't want to vandalise public art. And even if statues are to be removed, ought to be done through some legal process. Now, BLM is a broad church, and being latitudinarian, not everybody agrees with all of its objectives. It's kind of a broad, well, what would I say, conglomerate of views on various things. Okay, there is racial equality, but that's to do with police brutality and sometimes education or income inequality and public art and public spaces, things like that. And so those who are broadly sympathetic to BLM, their views are not all of one accord on all of these issues. But they shouldn't be wading into these contentious issues. I know BLM is a worldwide movement. It's primarily American. And Prince Harry, he doesn't live in a Commonwealth country. He's chosen to live in the United States. He had 53 other Commonwealth countries to pick from, and he's chosen to live in that one. So Harry says that some benefit from systemic racism. So how about you, Your Royal Highness? Don't you then? You're white last time I checked. What's he doing to renounce his Caucasian privilege? And white privilege, it's a disputed issue. Not everybody agrees that it exists. So his wife says equality is good for everyone, but not good enough for them, which is why they have to be so high and mighty, put on a pedestal with these titles. I mean, it's ludicrous that they're harping on about the need to be egalitarian, despite being completely inegalitarian themselves, and just hogging this podium. So I think they should pipe down a bit. We've had enough sort of megaphone diplomacy from them, finger-wagging, lecturing everybody what else to do, moral grandstanding, being such Pharisees. But all right, let me assume this comes from the right place. They're compassionate. They're trying to help. They care. They're not just trying to show that they're holier than thou. So anyway, so BLM are protesting primarily about black people who've been murdered by the police. And that's terrible. Definitely don't want anyone to be, people be getting killed altogether. But what about places where people are killed in much, much higher numbers, like Syria or Libya or Afghanistan? What do Harry and Meghan think about that one? Because the number is far, far higher, shouldn't they be speaking out about that? I mean, okay, none of those countries are Commonwealth countries. Libya was briefly British administered after the Second World War. Afghanistan has had a sort of bad history there. I mean, and Harry fought in Afghanistan, for goodness sake. So for good or ill, he has had some influence on what's happening there today. So we could speak out about that issue. But all right, perhaps he considers that beyond his remit. Even he doesn't think he can set the world to rights. But I think these two should be a little bit quieter. I think we should have a period of silence from these two, and that would be very welcome indeed. So please follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. Look at my English law channel, my British poetry channel. And what else might you need to know? Oh yes, I do online lessons in history, politics, English as a foreign language, French, religious studies, and so on. I translate from French, Spanish, Italian, Romanian, German, and Russian. And I help you with essays, dissertations, theses, your CV, interview practice, elocution, things of that nature. And I'm a tour guide in Londinium. Okay, toodaloo.